My name is Rick Payne, as you probably saw in the guide. I'm 32. I'm a software engineer. I live and work in Mason. I'm a native of Cincinnati. In January of 2007, I went to the emergency room with what I thought was going to be just a routine pneumonia or something. I didn't think I was that sick. I hadn't been sick in a very long time. And that was the start of a very long journey that I'm still on. I was diagnosed when I went to the hospital room that day with acute promyelocytic leukemia. In fact, as was mentioned, I would go on to have 4 relapses, and I've had acute promyelocytic leukemia 5 times. For those that don't know, acute promyelocytic leukemia is a blood cancer that keeps your body from being able to repair itself with its platelets. It also spread to my brain and spine. I had a total of about 24 months of chemotherapy. I had 2 bone marrow transplants from unrelated donors. I had total body irradiation in 2010. I had total lung failure. I had a rhizopus infection in my sinuses, and that was nearly fatal. I had 8 spinal taps during the course of my treatment. I had over 30 bone marrow biopsies. I lost count, actually. I had partial paralysis from an allergy to a drug from the waist down. I couldn't walk. I had retinal bleeding, which caused me to be blind for the very first month I got treatment. I currently am still struggling with graft-versus-host disease, which can be fatal in some transplant patients. Come on. Oh, and in total, I spent over a year in the hospital, at Jewish Hospital, between 2007 and 2010. I had mono the whole time, on and off most of the time, Epstein-Barr. And since I got 2 bone marrow transplants, which essentially reset your immune system, last April, I got chickenpox again. So I've had chickenpox twice. I know, right? So anyhow, this was hard. But this was only half of what I had to struggle through. The hardest part was that I had to keep my insurance this entire time. I had just started my career, and I was self-employed as a software engineer, working for myself, and I worked for a company that was too small for Cobra insurance. So for me, every month was a challenge. How am I going to get my treatment? How am I going to get my pills? One of the things I had to do is I had to self-administer my own chemo after work. I did this for 7 months. This is a picture of me mixing up the drug I had to take after the arsenic trioxide, which took 5 hours. And I'd have to mix vitamin C afterwards. And I'd self-administer this, and I'd do this every night. I'd go to work from about 9 to about 3 o'clock. I'd come home, and from 4 to 10, I'd self-administer my own chemotherapy. I came close to dying a lot of times. I'm very fortunate to be here, and if it wasn't for my friends, my family, my support, the hospital I stayed at, and the doctors, and everybody involved, I wouldn't be here. I'm very fortunate to be here. And some of the close cases where I came really close was when I went to the hospital the very first time. Had my emergency room doctor not been a leukemia survivor, she wouldn't have seen the subtle signs, and she would have sent me home. Or I would have been sent home with just a Z-Pack, and I probably would have bled to death in my sleep that night. My first transplant wasn't covered by insurance. It was out of network. And a transplant is not something a hospital has to give to you. My insurance company wanted to send me to another city to have my transplant. I knew that if I had gone there, and I had to go for 6 months, if I had gone there and I had been separated from my support network, there was no way I would have survived. My first transplant failed 5 months after I received it. And it was very difficult to get me back into remission. 4 months of chemo didn't do it. And they kept ramping up the chemo. In fact, I had one of the hardest treatments that Jewish Hospital has ever given a patient. In fact, my treatment was so hard at this point, there were regular ethical decisions on whether it was ethical to continue to treat me. By sheer luck, and I happened to sit in the sun one day, on a March day, and I got sunburned in March, sitting in my hospital room. That triggered my graft-versus-host disease, which got my leukemia back under control. I was very lucky that happened. And finally, after I got through my second transplant, I had a weakened immune system. I managed to get shingles in my lungs. It caused me to have total lung failure within 24 hours. And I spent 10 days intubated on a ventilator. And luckily, we had a very experimental lung biopsy to find out exactly what was wrong. And I could have died, and probably should have died, on the table. Now, a lot of people, I have been through a lot. And I have to advocate this. I have to tell this story because I want to help other people. And a lot of people ask me how I got through this. Well, first, I got lucky. Second, I was given a choice. The first week I was sick, I was sitting in my hospital room trying to decide if I wanted to go through this. I had no idea that I would relapse 4 times, have 2 bone marrow transplants, and have over 30 bone marrow biopsies, which, by the way, might be a record. And I was sitting in my room. I was enjoying a very heavy dose of morphine, and a black mist came through the door, walked around my bed and sat down, and I recognized this to be the angel of death. I hadn't made my decision yet, and suddenly the decision was right in front of my face. And we didn't exchange any dialogue. I just sat there, and I knew why I was facing this black, beautiful mist that was just captured my imagination. And I said, I don't think I'm ready to go. The black mist got up and walked out the door. 2 years later, when I was having the very hard treatment, the black mist came back. It came back right after my nurse told me, Mr. Payne, it's time for you to get your personal effects in order. And then the black mist came back. And I sat up in my bed, and I yelled at the top of my lungs, fuck off. I had gone through too much at that point, and I was not ready to give up. The reason I'm here to talk to you today is I want you guys to consider bone marrow donation. This is what a bone marrow transplant looks like, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my donor. Donors, plural. What my friend here is holding in her hand is a bag of bone marrow. And a bone marrow transplant, they do not cut you open. It is a 1-hour IV. But what makes it so difficult is the chemotherapy that you get before and after it. And here's a picture of me getting my second bone marrow transplant. And I may be the only patient ever in the history of mankind to eat a sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit from McDonald's while getting a bone marrow transplant. This is my donor. This is Kelly Dorn. I wouldn't be here without her. Now, what Kelly Dorn did is she went to beathematch.org to sign up for a friend of hers that needed a bone marrow transplant. She got in the mail a cotton swab, much like this one. She scraped it against the inside of her cheek and mailed it in. Now, that's what most bone marrow transplant patients do. She was called up. They did more tests. And the way she donated marrow, there's 2 ways to donate marrow. One way, you take some medicine and they take some blood. That's done 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, you go in, you actually have a surgery. And they actually extract it out of your hip or your sternum. Now, that sounds scary, but this late 40s mother of 2 did this for me, and she was back to work and on her feet the next day. It's not that tough. So I want you guys to consider this. I want you guys to consider bone marrow donation. Here's some of my friends that didn't make it. Michelle Macon here on the up top left. She isn't here because she did not have a bone marrow donor. She was one of my best friends. So if you guys would please do it, go to bethematch.org tonight. Please consider bone marrow donation, and thank you very much for your time.
All right.